Well, welcome to this video, and I've had so many requests for Mr. Andrew Bridgen, Member of Parliament, to come onto the channel. And I'm delighted Mr. Bridgen has come on this morning. So, Andrew, welcome, and it's a real privilege and a pleasure to have you on the channel.
And it's a privilege to be invited on and to get a chance to speak, John, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
What I'd like to do, first of all, if you don't mind, if we could just trace your thinking over the pandemic years. Mine has certainly evolved quite a lot. There's been realisations, pennies have dropped, disappointments have occurred. What's your sort of development since early 2020?
I think I've developed in a way very similar to yourself, John. I am actually double vaccinated with AstraZeneca, something I deeply regret now. And when I went and got those vaccines in my constituency, I actually posted pictures of myself having the vaccine, which will be seen by my constituents and others. And again, I deeply regret that. But as Einstein says, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? And the sort of growing concerns around the whole pandemic response, from the lockdowns to the rollout of the vaccines, it all sort of compounded, and I started researching using some of my old historic knowledge from university, speaking to, I have very good access to academics and medics, and also through the House of Commons library, I can get any paper from anywhere pretty much instantaneously, or certainly within 24 hours. So I carried on researching, and I wasn't liking what I was hearing. I voted against the Plan B. I really researched Omicron, and I spoke to some of the South African doctors and scientists, and I think the way they were treated and their evidence was treated by our Parliament, I found it really quite insulting and smacked of racism to me. When we remember that South Africa was the place where we had the first ever heart transplant, their science was good. Their evidence was good, and I stood up in Parliament in December 21, opposed Plan B, pointed out that I believe that Omicron was probably the best Christmas present we could ever have had, by the attenuation of the virus to something less pathogenic, more transmissible. And what we also knew is there was no lockdown measures were going to stop an R rate of 12 or 14. China couldn't do it with those extreme lockdown measures. So I voted against the masks, the mandates, and all those restrictions. And clearly, obviously, when I found out that that Partygate broke, and that those at number 10 who were privy to the best science, the latest figures, they weren't concerned about social distancing or masks.
No.
And I think the other thing that really got me, John, was during the lockdowns, which I voted against after the second one. The suicide rate in my constituency went up 400%. We were having more suicides in a month than we'd have in a normal year. And I really wanted to speak out about it, but I was so concerned about copycat. And quite honestly, for a failed policy, I just hate the idea that my constituents and other people were just seen as pure collateral damage.
So unlike most of your colleagues in Parliament, you do actually have a science degree. You've studied genetics and biology, which is refreshing. So that gives you a good understanding of what's going on. One thing that's concerned my viewers an awful lot, Andrew, is you've stood up in Parliament and given an evidence-based rationale. And there doesn't seem to be any interaction. So what I'd expect is you stand up and say, well, this evidence here from the reanalysis of the vaccine paper shows such and such. This is inconsistent with the government thinking at the moment. You would expect some interaction. Someone would say, well, just a minute, let's go back and look at that data, or let's compare that with data from someone else, which shows a contrary view. None of that. Why is it that they don't seem to want to academically, intellectually interact with your evidence?
I don't think they're used to that level of scientific analysis in parliamentary debates. The ministers are not appointed by their scientific qualifications generally. Yeah, you're right. Obviously this is a contentious issue, and we know the mainstream media narrative. So, every speech I gave on the vaccine harms was fully fact-checked by scientists and doctors prior to me giving it. And then obviously I produced a press pack immediately I sat down with all the papers itemised. And I think the first speech on the 30th of December to try and deter the government from vaccinating small children, I mean, I think that had 32 scientific papers and analyses attached to it. And the problem is as well, I mean, what you've seen, John, is time and again, when I put in for a contentious debate that's going to be difficult for the government, they don't even put the minister up who's actually responsible. Yeah. So it gives a get-out-of-jail-free card for the standing minister to say, well, if this is neither my speciality nor my area of responsibility, and I will write to the honourable gentleman. Well, I mean, we had all that on the 17th of March. What I can tell you, John, is that the government didn't write to me with the answers to those questions. I've now gone back to the minister, Will Quince, and pointed out to him that he's a good chap, really, and he did promise me he'd answer those questions, and I don't want to have to raise a point of order in the House of Commons.
Mm-hmm. Overall, though, I get the impression that your interventions, although there's like an official blind ear been turned on to them, I actually get the impression that you've moderated some of the government behaviour. So even though they haven't interacted publicly because they can't be seen to go against the narrative, for example, the Autumn Booster campaign was for the over 55s, not for everyone. The current campaign, frantic backpedalling, is now for over 75s and those with significant comorbidities. I mean, and to many parents' relief, we never vaccinated babies in this country as they've done in the States. And I feel your interventions have had a moderating effect on that. Do you think that's the case?
I believe so, and I hope so. But I think also what it's done is it's moved public opinion and awareness. And it's that is in a democracy, surely it's the view of the people and the pressure they put on their elected members of Parliament. I know it's had an effect because colleagues in the House of Commons have rather slyly said to me, Andrew, for goodness sake, don't give another speech because we can't stand the emails. So clearly people around the country are doing the right thing, putting pressure on their elected representatives to raise issues of concern. And I don't think there's anything more concerning than public health, the vaccination of small children, who John, you've pointed out the science is there. I mean, there isn't a healthy child of that age group who has suffered death due to the virus, but clearly there are risks associated with the vaccine. So it never made sense. And I'd known for quite a long time, and I was wanted to speak out, but it was when the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, pushed the government for approval for those experimental vaccines down to children of the age of 6 months. That's when I felt I had to speak out. And also I thought that was something that the science was so clear and the risk-benefit analysis so starkly that even the most pro-vaccine member of the public, I felt I would be able to explain to them that this was a risk not worth taking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I've had literally thousands of comments on, Andrew, is the fact that when you've given your well-researched, well-reasoned, fully referenced, expert-consulted speeches in Parliament, very often it's been to an empty house. Is there, comment on this as you will, but is there a deliberate walkout strategy or is it apathy or what? It's just so impolite. You've done all this work. You've got a cardboard cutout junior minister who reads out some response which bears very little to what you've said. Is this deliberate or is it apathy or what? Why have we not got a parliamentary debate going on?
Well, adjournment debates at the end of the business of the day are used by members often to raise very local issues. I mean, I've seen them up on the screen, bus services in Bolton. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily expect a lot of interest from the whole House for such a local issue. But the issues I raised were not local. They were questions that were affecting every household, every community, every constituency in the country. And certainly after the first speech, when I was announcing I was going to give another one, I mean, there was considerable awareness amongst colleagues and their constituents who were emailing their MPs saying, could you please attend this important debate? So maybe the first speech, but certainly not the second. At the end of the day, John, I can't answer for colleagues' behaviour. I can only answer for my own. It is a huge issue, and as you know yourself, the interest around this issue is not restricted even to the UK. It's global, and it's growing very rapidly, quite rightly. So you would have expected considerably more engagement from my colleagues than we've had, and I'm sure they've had plenty of emails.
Yeah, and those pictures shown around the world have done British parliamentary democracy no good at all. Basically, that empty house has held us up to mockery in the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. It just makes the system look farcical.
It has, but I mean, you have to remember that when I speak even to an empty house, an empty chamber, that is recorded in Hansard, and it does go out as a video clip. I think it's the narrative that we're up against to get to the truth and the science. I think it's fairly damning when YouTube will take down a speech with a response from a minister from the mother of all parliaments for 3 days because it violates their community guidelines. That is deeply worrying. I did actually give a speech a couple of weekends ago in Norway, in Stavanger, to a conference on these issues. And I stood up on the stage, and it was a packed audience. And I said, "I'm actually feeling a little intimidated. I'm only actually used to speaking to an empty room."
Yeah. Who's paying for these vaccines, Andrew? They're costing us billions, aren't they?
The taxpayers paying for the vaccines.
Have we got plenty of spare cash at the moment?
We know it'll be going on the national debt, and I think that's the last speech I gave on the 17th of March on the vaccines. I did point out the cost of the number to vaccinate to prevent one hospitalisation or one serious hospitalisation. And it's interesting that after that speech, within a few days, the criteria was moved to only the over 75s.
Yeah.
And it did mention for the first time value for money. There is no money. There's no government money. It's all taxpayers' money. And I think a large number of our Parliament have forgotten that. I think some of them also have forgotten that we're not the masters of the people, we're the servants of the people. And I think the next election may be an opportunity to remind a few people a few facts of life.
Absolutely, yeah. Answer this to the degree you see fit, Andrew, of course, and bear in mind this is a public domain channel, but is there influence of corporate interests in Parliament?
I think people know that the current parliamentary system we've got, it doesn't appear to be working for the people anymore. And I actually have said publicly that I'm very, very concerned that what we should be doing, and I thought we used to do, was we passed laws and legislation on behalf of the people, for the people. And now it appears that we actually have a whole parliament, not even a government, but a whole parliament that's conspiring to inflict laws upon the people. And that is not democracy. And the use of Project Fear and the psyops during the pandemic, and also, John, I mean, I like to, when my constituents come to me with problems, as they do, and they can be anything from the front door to my council house needs replacing to, very personal issues. I like to. They're clearly worried. I always try and reassure them and say, now that you've told me and my team, it's normally on a Friday, I want you to have, relax this weekend because we'll deal with this now. Have confidence. And that's what I think governments should be there for, to look at the problems the country faces and deal with them and let the people get on with their lives. But what we've seen increasingly is every issue from pandemics to climate change, it seems to be pushing the concern onto the people instead of dealing with the problems that the country and the world faces and let people get on with their lives. It's almost making people feel responsible for these issues. You're the problem. And I find that deeply, deeply worrying and unpalatable, quite honestly. And it's the anathema of what I came into politics for.
Yeah.